Come, all of you, to worship. Some of you are dialing or streaming in, sitting at your kitchen table with a laptop or a phone, giving your old dog a scratch. Or maybe you're outside on your deck, it's full summer after all, watching your garden grow. So I salute you. We know there are a myriad of other things you could be doing that may even still be calling to you a bit, yet you are here at Eastrose's YouTube site. And you are here, those who brought their bodies into the sanctuary here in our building. Regardless of which part of the multiverse you inhabit, you came. Some of you with aching hearts, others with joy that lights you from within. All of us here with a hunger to feel we are part of a larger life, a larger witness, a communion of love, joy, and wholeness. Come then come and become this community of worship. There is a moment in every candle lighting, in every Unitarian Universalist service where the flame is a light in our hand and has not yet touched the candle wick. It mimics that moment we have with each other before we speak hard words, before we answer a child in anger. We have a moment to choose our response. We have a moment to choose how the flame of our words touches the heart of another. Welcome. Welcome to Eastrose Fellowship Unitarian Universalists. I am Reverend Katie Larcell, and I'm your worship leader today. Just ignore that man over there. It is so very good to know that you are out there on YouTube. A big hello to visitors attending an Eastrose worship service for the first time or second time, and another big hello to those seated here in front of me. Would those who can stand easily, please do so. And let's direct our greetings to the camera by the clock. On our back wall, that is our conduit to folks joining us online. Hello, welcome, good morning, buongiorno, buenos dias, konnichiwa, namaste. Go ahead and be seated, everyone. Here are some quick reminders of ways to participate in the service. Listen close. Oh, yeah, you guys are, yeah, now. It's the teacher. You know, honestly, you guys get ahead of us sometimes. We're trying to follow COVID rules, and everyone else is following people rules. On YouTube, if you want to share a joy or concern or an announcement, send us a note in the chat. We will collect all of them, and I will read them aloud later in the service. If you are here in the sanctuary, you can come up in front of the congregation. I will read any joys and concerns that have come through the chat. If you have an announcement in person, fill out an announcement form and put it in the collection basket. Finally, after the conclusion of each service, there will be a Zoom cafe conversation time for those online. Just exit YouTube and then hit the link in the chat or on, I don't think it's in the chat, it's on Zoom somewhere, that provides you with a link to the Eastrose's chat site on Zoom. And also it is shown on the Eastrose website and in Petals. So we are delighted to welcome Reverend Larry Jorgensen back to our pulpit today. I was just kidding when I waved him away. Pastor Larry studied journalism and theology at the University of Leuven, Belgium, and wrote his doctoral dissertation on the freedom of the press and the right to information. He is an ordained minister of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America and has worked in the church as an educator, social service provider, and parish pastor. Now, please rise and sing our opening hymn, number 38. There it is. In the gray hymnal, Morning Has Broken. So how many of you think of Cat Stevens when you hear that song? That's inevitable. We will now receive your offerings for the support of this religious community and its work in the world. At Eastrose, we share half of our proceeds with a community organization. In this July, August, and September, we are sharing it with the partner organization, Friends of Nadaka Park. Now, I've been a member of Eastrose long enough to see this park transform from a fenced-in, almost dangerous area where neighbors, at least, didn't feel safe walking through it. And now it is a showplace of the community. So for those of you participating online, you can find donation options on the screen and through the Eastrose website. Here in the chapel, as the baskets go by, remember you can also put in announcements. First-time visitors, you are our guests. Please let the basket pass. Your presence today is your gift to us. The gifts of the congregation will now be most gratefully received. And while we're walking around and gathering with our baskets, I invite you to view this video of Nadaka Park. It was made just after it was open, and it's just full of positive spirit about how the community has embraced this park.
It's nothing short of amazing. I don't know how else to describe it.
And that momentum kind of really just built.
When you invest your time and your effort into something, you take pride in it.
The spark to get all these people involved and passionate about this park and learning and caring for their environment.
Todos los niños están bien divertidos y le dije a mis hijos, mire qué bonito se llenó el parque.
Very heartfelt thank you to Lee Dayfield and everybody that has worked on this, because this is nothing short of amazing.
It started out as a Campfire Girls Camp, and they spent about 40 years there enjoying the park all to themselves.
Nadaka was just a great place to try things that I'd never tried before, and they gave you the confidence to want to try things.
The voters of Gresham, who passed a open space bond measure in 1990, acquired this 10-acre, at that time, natural area park from the Campfire Girls, the former Campfire Girl camp.
After the city acquired it, it was 10 acres surrounded by an 8-foot chain link fence with barbed wire.
Lee Dayfield's passion for the park and gaining community involvement has been amazing to witness.
She has a tender way of getting you to value it and like it as much as she does.
I had a vision one day when I was walking my dog that what a wonderful place to have a nature-based play area and community garden.
¿Te gusta regar? Sí.
What a great, great, great amenity for this community, and it would have never ever happened without citizens that took the lead and brought it to City Hall, found partnerships, and then we were able to move it forward.
And then we were able to take down the whole fence, and now it really looks like a park.
Lo que yo pienso es que ellos están haciendo un trabajo fantástico para la comunidad y para la familia, y gracias por ello también yo tengo un pedacito de jardín que tengo ahorita, y gracias por su apoyo de ellos que hicieron este parque tan bonito.
The neighborhood was so devoid of a place to bring children to just enjoy the simple things of nature that it's really been a gift.
It gets you away from the hustle and bustle of life. It gets you to just look at things you don't normally take the time to look at.
Say touching a thimbleberry and feeling how soft and smooth it is, just like their faces light up, they're like, oh my gosh, what is this? It's such a new sensation, they didn't realize it was there.
That access to nature is really important for a lot of indicators of individual and community health, well-being, mental health, physical health.
Y dice que le gusta el jardín. Cada vez que vengo al jardín, mami, yo voy contigo, yo te voy a ayudar a plantar semilla. Y yo lo voy a mirar crecer.
almost every time I go over there, I think about this. And sometimes I'll just sit on the rock circle. It really almost makes me want to cry. I really attribute it more to the magic of what Nadaka is.
We have dreams and ideas, but we think that there's boundaries and we don't know how to get around them or over them, and it's going to make us stop, and that means we can't go on and we can't try. But Lee persevered, and she would hit a boundary and she'd just find another way around it. She didn't give up.
There's so much love behind this park, and it's not just Lee, she infects other people with this energy, this passion to be like, I want to help this park too.
Maybe it would motivate other people to make collaborations and come up with some wonderful project, like a community center in Gresham. Who knows?
Any of us, you set your mind to something, you can do it.
That video is so delightfully upbeat, and one of the things that I don't even think had happened at the time that they made that video was that the park made a connection with the local middle school, which is within walking distance, and so the kids go back and forth to the park and use it for nature study. So that's really pretty fantastic. Now it's time for joys and concerns. So you come, some of you with aching hearts, others with joy that lights you from within. So we will now share our joys and concerns, and hopefully not resentments, okay? I invite you to put your hand over your heart and feel that heart connection that we have, even across space with each other. Take a deep breath and let your attention settle into your body. All right. The green heart stone is the last stone that enters the water. And it carries with it all of those unspoken griefs. Let us hold these joys and concerns that have been shared, and those too tender ones that are unshared in our hearts. May you be safe. May you be well. May you be happy. May you have ease of well-being. Amen. So may it be. Let us sing together in a quiet way. Every night and every morn, it's in the gray hymnal, number 17.
So the letter of James was written to a worshiping community somewhere around the year 100. And some of the concerns of that community, of that fellowship, of that group, we recognize in this passage. And it goes like this. Who is wise and understanding among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness, born of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not be boastful and false to the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, devilish. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. And there ends the reading. Decades ago, I had an instructor whose name was Sister Mary Francis. And she was about that tall. And she was as tough as a drill sergeant. Let's see if I can remember one of the things that she taught me. It's a list of 7 sins. 7 sins. It goes like this, I believe, if I recall correctly: pride, envy, wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony, and lust. List of what she called 7 sins. This is an ancient list. You go back to the Canterbury Pilgrims, Chaucer's work, 1400s. He makes a lot of that list. And of course, it sounds a little old-fashioned, and it could be that rather than talking about sins now, we need to talk about attitudes. The list I just rattled off, hopefully correctly, the list I just rattled off, these were called cardinal sins because they gave rise to a whole Pandora's box of other things. I think it would be good for us in this day and age to think, what would our list look like? And what lies at the bottom of much of the mischief we deliver upon one another and is delivered upon us? Katie mentioned that some of my background is in journalism, so I still read newspapers. I still do that. I have a granddaughter that looks at me while I do that. What is that thing? Do you color on it or what? Going through newspapers, I've noticed over the last couple of years, maybe the last 3 or 4 years, maybe since the year 2016, I've noticed the following words, and I don't have a list of 7, but I have a list of 4. I've noticed these words: often, bitterness, Someone in an editorial wrote recently, we are people who have become proud of our own bitterness. So what is bitterness? Bitterness is internal, it's sourness inside. But it's connected with the second word on my list, so we go from bitterness to spite. Just the other day, I heard about how we know more and more about a thing called spite voting. Now, what's that? That's weaponized voting. What we're doing is we're voting to act out our bitterness. We do it spitefully. So those are a couple of words that I would have on my list. And then we get to resentment that I want to dwell on in the remainder of my time. We have resentment and we have contempt. Now, what is resentment? Somebody has recently written a book on the empire of resentment. And the point of the book is, if we wanted to see one of the motivating factors in our society, especially since the rise of the internet, we might want to look at resentment. So his book is The Empire of Resentment. Now, I wanted to write in my retirement a book that was an alphabetical listing of different things that we have to deal with. So A is for, B is for. And I found myself jumping ahead all the time to R is for. R is for resentment. Now, resentment, again, is something we harbor. We harbor a resentment. But just like spite, we can find an outlet for our resentment in contempt, looking down on others. Now, I grew up in a logging community here in Oregon. Not up here, it was farther south. And yes, in the community and in my family, there was a good deal of what I later came to recognize as resentment. How come those people in Portland are so rich and we're so poor? Or my parents would say something along the lines of, doctors and lawyers have all the money and we don't have any. So you grow up and by osmosis pick up this kind of resentment, and I'm grateful to a few people who have helped me identify that later on. That's what was going on. You know? We were learning resentment. Now the word resentment, notice that there is not just an R at the beginning, there is an R-E at the beginning. And resentment means that we go back again and again and again and again and again over the same territory. I described it this way one time to a person who was trying to counsel me out of my resentment. I said, it's like I have a whole mess of ball bearings and I just threw those ball bearings in the garbage disposal. And I turned on the garbage disposal, and what happens? It's like popcorn. You know, it just goes going over the same territory again and again. For a long time, I thought, well, you know, I'm maybe the only person on earth who is feeling this now, you know, this resentment. And I came across a book, actually it was written a few years ago, Studs Terkel. Wrote a number of books, interview books. He has a book called Working, and he went around And he talked to people who were working like real jobs. This was in the 1970s, so he went to Detroit, and there was a big car industry, of course, in Detroit, and he interviewed somebody whose name was Michael Lefebvre, and Michael Lefebvre's comment has remained with me ever since I came across Turkle's work. It goes like this. I would really, he said, when I'm on the job, like to punch somebody out, but how do you punch out General Motors? How do you do that? It's interesting to know, you know, just the amount of resentment that there could be all around. And this resentment isn't always a call for what others might recognize as social justice. This could be a resentment. How come you've got it and I don't got it? Now, one of the things that I had a chance to take a look at, and again, Katie referred to my background a little bit, I had a chance to study propaganda. Now, I thought that propaganda was just you come up with a big load of lies and you just keep repeating the lies again and again and again and again, and then pretty soon everybody believes those lies, and that's good. Oh, that is such a primitive idea of propaganda. How does propaganda work, especially today? Oh, it works like this. Who's resentful out there? Let's see if I can connect with those people who are resentful, who don't like going to DMV, standing in line when people who are Spanish-speaking are in a quicker line over here. We could take a few minutes and think of these sorts of, how come those people get this stuff? I lived for years in Alaska. One of the common resentments was, why do Native Alaskans get health care? Well, the quick answer to that is to get health care because it's specified in a treaty written with the United States government. But there was a lot of that. Why do they get things and we don't get them? We don't get enough. They get stuff that we should have, or because they get stuff that we don't have yet, we're not going to get it. So if you want to be a great propagandist today, find out who's resentful. The genius, and I use the word, yes, in quotation marks, the genius on this was Adolf Hitler. The genius was Joseph Goebbels. Who is resentful? Well, propaganda, the way it works is you stoke that resentment until finally what happens? It boils over to contempt. And people are willing to act on it. Well, one of the concerns I have living in this country as a citizen, as a resident, as a person, one of the concerns I have is we often hear, we had a president a couple of terms back who used this fairly often, we often hear that the arc of history is bending to social justice. And that is a very comforting thought. And I'm thinking, why is it that the arc of history moves to justice, meaning that more and more people are treated justly? So 250 years ago, people who drafted the Declaration of Independence really we're saying the people who count in society are white landowners who happen to be men. And after a while, it's, white men. After a while, it's white men and women. After a while, it's whites and, maybe African Americans, so on. We can look at that and we can say, yeah, the arc is bending. And it's bending in the direction of justice. But I think another way of talking about this is, over time, what we get to see is that people in different places have included more and more folk in the group that really, according to their minds, counts. And what I mean by that, white landowners count, white guys count, white men and women count, people of all backgrounds, all the rich diversity that we find in the human race, they all count. More and more people count. Well, the question, the problem, the thing that concerns me is what happens when we have so many voices telling us so often, yes, well, they don't count really. They don't count as much. They don't count the way, well, maybe they think they do. Now, one of the obvious examples we have of this, if you ever had the temerity to express a political opinion and have somebody blow that off entirely and say, it doesn't matter. You're just some kind of conservative, some kind of liberal. Let's put it this way, you're stupid. Really what that's saying is you don't count. And what's going on is we don't have a moral arc of the universe that's bending to social justice. We have a grouping of folk who really matter, and that used to be expanding, but we definitely are hearing how it doesn't need to be as large as it has been in the past. And I would submit to you that really what we're looking at is what's happening as our resentment festers, as it's stoked, and as we're filled with contempt. Now, what do we do about that? I was hoping I would run out of time before you expected me to say what we should do about that. But I looked, and I'm not quite out of time yet. So I do have a couple of things that I would like to say. I do believe that we are in a place. It took me a long time to get my head wrapped around about the resentment that I experienced in my growing up time. We see so much resentment in the larger society now that perhaps we have the possibility of becoming more aware of the resentment in our own lives. Who do we resent? Because we say, yeah, we'd really like to respond to all of this resentment going on. We'd really like to respond to that. We'd like to respond to that knucklehead who just cut me off on I-84. But response is really connected to responsibility. What do I do with all of the stuff that's festering inside of me toward that knucklehead who just cut me off on I-84? Or a real hard question, what do I say to my neighbors and to my relatives who do not agree with me? who do not agree with me on any number of subjects or issues. What do I say to these people? Do I say you're stupid, or do I say you count, you matter? Trying to work on a project of saying to them, you count, you count. We include you. Well, in my research so far on resentment, I located a really interesting and surprising source to me. I put in the word, using my fine computer skills, I put in the word resentment. I got a bunch of hits for Alcoholics Anonymous. And it goes like this. You know, there are 12 steps to Alcoholics Anonymous, and not to get into the weeds here, but there is a fourth step. And in that fourth step, people are asked and expected to do an inventory of their stuff, of their issues. And Alcoholics Anonymous, Drugs Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, these folks actually say, make a list of your resentments. Who do you bear a grudge against? And making a list, well, maybe that is a first step. Maybe that is a good step. And maybe that's a way of looking at a wider problem here. How can I matter to other people by letting them know that they matter to me? How do I do that? How do I do that? Well, this is a fellowship. You come together, you are together, you lean on one another. That's a good thing to do. How can we do more of that? How can we do more of that, and how can we be thinking of including, of raising that number of people who matter as far as we can? Well, good news. Good news, we have a morning that breaks. That was a great hymn, Morning Breaks. We have not just woes and resentments, but we do have joys. Good thing to celebrate. We can do that. What about, I'm going to come back to the last line of the reading that I had to wrap this up. What about that line right at the end, and I'm sure all of you remember what it was, right? You know, everybody remembers what that last line was, right? I believe it went like this. It has to do with a harvest of righteousness for those who sow peace. I like that way of phrasing it, sowing peace, planting peace. And that harvest of righteousness, those who sow peace, for those who make peace. I know you're peacemakers. Let's make peace. And I have another part while I'm up here. And I get to announce the next hymn. And the next hymn is, I believe, hymn 34. And I believe it is in the gray hymn book. Or if you are part of the younger set like me, you know, you're just used to reading everything off a screen, I think you could do it that way too. So any other instructions? We think we know it. Do we stand up for hymns?
We stand. The actual name of this hymn is not "Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire." That's just the first line. This hymn is actually called "The Gift of Love."
All right. So as you are able. You could stand. May we be ones about whom it will be said, there was for them a harvest of righteousness. They sowed peace. They made peace. May we be people like that. May we teach one another how to do these things. And in the fellowship here, do we say amen? We do. Katie says we do, so I'll say amen.
Really, no one has listened to me as closely as Larry has. Your mic is all the time. No one has listened to me as closely as Larry has in a long time. So, did anyone hear the candle lighting, the extinguishing? Oh, let me do it. We extinguish this chalice, cherishing our own sense of belonging in this fellowship, recognizing that we belong here in this world, in this body, in all the difficult ways that we connect with one another. We should not forget that we all belong.
You mean that I extinguished that before I was supposed to?
You know, I turned it off so that your words would be well heard, and I swore to myself that I would turn it on again. Didn't do it. Didn't do it.
So we don't have to do the whole thing again?
No, not the whole thing, just that little piece of it. Larry's a lot of fun to work with. I just want to tell you that. I don't know if you noticed, but he's really a lot of fun to work with. And I think I'm doing announcements now. Is that? No. Postlude. All right. Then announcements.
Wait and see the slide. Well, I'm just going to start anyway.
Yeah, I think that's wise. have announcements. So apparently we don't have a lot of announcements. So before we get going, I just want to thank Patty Walsh for all the work she did. She took over as the master controller in the back, and it was, and the two other people who do it all the time are off having fun. So thank you, Patty, for all that work. And then next week, we have, for our service, we have Falling in Love with a Wounded World, How Poetry Can Help Us in Dark Times, put on by Paul Ann Peterson. She is the Oregon Poet Laureate Emerita, and she'll be using a handful of poems to talk about the role of poetry in these fraught times, how poetry can help us grapple with the crises and catastrophes that seem to be daily occurrences. And the worship leader will be Sumitrango Watson. So this concludes our service. Folks here in the chapel can now visit together, and folks online can join our cafe conversation by clicking on the link in the chat or going to the Eastrose website or our weekly Petals email for the link.